There are hidden pages of the Ethiopian Bible that speak of a power Jesus taught, a power not lost, but forgotten, a power that does not wait for miracles, but creates them. And once you hear this today, you will never pray the same way again. If you've ever wondered why some prayers move mountains, while others echo into silence, this message will open what ancient teachers called the chamber of inner authority. Stay with me till the end, because what you'll hear in the final section is the missing link between faith and manifestation, something many have read, but very few have ever understood. In the ancient pages of the Ethiopian Bible, we discover a teaching that radiates with unusual clarity, a teaching that reveals not only what Jesus did, but how he expected every believer to operate. These writings present his message not as distant history, but as living instruction. They show a Jesus who consistently pointed humans back to the inner life, the hidden dimension of thought and consciousness where true power resides. When we explore these sacred pages, we encounter Jesus speaking directly to the human mind. He tells his followers that the universe responds to belief, not to fear, to inner certainty, not to outer struggle. He explains that the world a person sees is shaped first by the world they hold within, and that every change in life begins with a change in thought. This is not metaphor, it is spiritual law. The writings emphasize that Jesus never performed a miracle from doubt or hesitation. He acted from a place of union with the source. When he spoke from conviction. When he healed from awareness. And when he taught that the same awareness lives in every human soul. But he warned that most people never awaken to it because they become prisoners of their senses, believing only what they see instead of seeing what they believe. Throughout these texts, Jesus continually invites the listener to discover a deeper truth, that the mind, aligned with divine intention, becomes a creative instrument, not passive, not weak, not begging life for change, but shaping life from within. He calls this the single eye, the focused inner vision that transforms circumstances. When your inner conversation matches your desired reality, your world reorganizes itself to reflect it. The Ethiopian writings highlight a striking pattern in Jesus' words. He speaks repeatedly of spoken intention. He knew that the tongue is the vibration of thought made physical. Words reinforce belief, and belief determines outcome. When he said, "According to your faith be it unto you," he was declaring a universal law, that life mirrors the internal state. The moment you accept a new mental image, energy begins to move, harmony begins to align, and doors begin to open. This message becomes even more profound when Jesus describes the power dwelling within each person. He states that the kingdom is not somewhere distant. It is not in the sky or across the sea. It is within you. Not metaphorically, literally. It is the divine creative impulse, the spark capable of moving into form what begins as thought. And he adds that whoever discovers this truth becomes a maker of change, a bearer of light, a channel of divine force. The Ethiopian Bible preserves teachings where Jesus explains that every problem first dissolves in consciousness. If the mind is in harmony, the body follows. If the mind is at peace, relationships shift. If the mind is lifted, opportunities advance. The external world becomes a reflection of inner alignment. This is why he urged his followers to guard their thoughts, to cultivate a mind of confidence, love, and expectation. In these writings, Jesus does not portray God as distant or withholding. Instead, he describes divine presence as an infinite reservoir, waiting for the individual to open the inner gate. He likens belief to a key, intention to a path, and gratitude to the force that multiplies blessings. When he fed multitudes, he began by giving thanks, not because the food was abundant, but because he recognized the source as infinite. The miracle followed the awareness. The Ethiopian texts stress one final, breathtaking revelation that Jesus expected his followers not to admire his works but to continue them. He declared that those who understand this power will perform even greater works, not through strain, not through ritual, but through the awakened understanding that the mind aligned with divine principle becomes unstoppable. This message is not about religion. It is about transformation. It is about rediscovering the divine mechanism within you, learning to speak with authority, think with clarity, and live with expectation. When you align the inner world with truth, the outer world reorganizes in your favor. The power Jesus spoke of is not lost. It is waiting, patiently, powerfully, silently, within your own consciousness. The Ethiopian Bible highlights Jesus' teaching that the mind is the gateway through which divine power flows. And when we explore this deeply, we begin to see that every miracle, every transformation, and every shift he demonstrated was rooted first in an inner state rather than an outer circumstance. These ancient writings do not present the mind as a passive organ reacting to life, but as an active channel through which divine intelligence expresses itself. Jesus consistently pointed to this interior realm as the origin of all spiritual power. He spoke to people not merely to inspire them, but to awaken them to the truth that the mind, when aligned with divine principle, becomes the most powerful instrument in existence. In the Ethiopian tradition, this idea is not presented as symbolic philosophy, but as practical spiritual law, a law operating whether one is aware of it or not. Jesus taught that thoughts carry creative force, and that every internal image, accepted with conviction, begins to shape the contours of one's life. He illustrated that the mind is not a container but a doorway, a portal between the visible and the invisible, between form and formlessness, between human limitation and divine possibility. When Jesus spoke of faith, he was not referring to blind optimism or emotional hopefulness. He was speaking about a state of consciousness, a mental certainty grounded in spiritual truth. Faith, in his teachings, is an inner recognition of the unseen reality that precedes physical manifestation. The Ethiopian text preserve moments when he explained that the mind determines what one allows from the divine to flow into experience. If the inner life is clouded with doubt, fear, and contradiction, the channel becomes restricted, and the divine flow cannot move freely into external expression. But when the mind is purified through belief, intention, and clarity, the gateway opens, allowing spiritual power to translate into tangible results. Jesus never indicated that this power belonged only to him. Instead, he consistently pointed to the universal nature of this gift, emphasizing that all humans possess the same inner bridge to the divine. In these writings, the mind is portrayed as the meeting point of heaven and earth. Jesus showed that the invisible realm responds to consciousness, that what one holds in sustained awareness begins to materialize in one's life. He demonstrated that the world is shaped not by random forces, but by inner alignment. Every healing he performed began with a mental decree, an inner recognition of wholeness that transcended appearances. When he restored sight to the blind or strength to the crippled, he first aligned his mind with the truth of divine perfection. He did not see sickness, he saw wholeness waiting to be revealed. He did not see lack, he saw abundance in its invisible form. His mind became the channel through which divine order replaced disorder. The Ethiopian texts reveal that he expected his followers to adopt this same inner posture, understanding that the mind, when anchored in truth, becomes a vessel of miraculous change. Jesus taught that the mind must be guarded, for it is the gate through which either divine power or destructive limitation enters. He cautioned people not to dwell on fear, resistance, or negativity, for these forms of thinking block the flow of spiritual energy. Instead, he urged them to cultivate thoughts aligned with peace, certainty, gratitude, and purposeful intention. He knew that the mental atmosphere one carries radiates outward and shapes circumstances. The mind is always creating, whether consciously or unconsciously. When one is unaware of this power, life seems chaotic, unpredictable, or unjust. But when one becomes aware of this inner law, life becomes responsive, cooperative, and full of possibility. The Ethiopian Bible reflects this truth repeatedly, emphasizing that kingdoms rise and fall within the mind before they appear in the physical world. In these writings, Jesus illustrates that the mind is not separate from the divine, but intimately connected to it. He describes the divine presence as a living stream, constantly flowing, waiting for the individual to open the channels of thought to receive it. This stream does not force itself, it responds to the mental images one holds. When a person dwells on limitation, the flow becomes limited. When a person dwells on abundance, the flow increases. When a person holds a vision of healing, harmony, or transformation, divine energy begins to move in that direction. Jesus taught that the mind is like the soil and divine power is the seed. The soil determines what grows. If the soil is filled with weeds of fear and doubt, the seed cannot flourish. But if the soil is rich with belief, clarity, and expectation, the seed brings forth its full potential. There are passages in the Ethiopian Bible where Jesus speaks of the inner chamber, the private place within, where one must go to commune with the divine. This chamber is not a physical location, it is the state of mind where one becomes still, focused, and receptive. It is here that the gateway opens widest. Jesus emphasized that transformation begins in this silent inner space, where the divine and human consciousness meet. He taught that whatever one establishes in this inner chamber will eventually appear in the outer world. He explained that prayer is not a desperate request but a mental alignment with divine truth. It is the intentional shaping of thought to reflect spiritual reality. When the mind enters this state, the individual becomes a conduit for divine activity. Throughout the Ethiopian texts, Jesus presents the mind as a sacred instrument capable of embodying divine will. He revealed that the divine is limitless, but the mind determines how much of that limitlessness one experiences. He explained that barriers are mental, not spiritual. The divine does not withhold power, it is the mind that restricts it. When a person changes their inner belief, the outer world shifts accordingly. When they accept a higher truth, the old patterns lose their grip. Jesus' teachings guide people to elevate their consciousness, to think from the level of divine possibility rather than from the level of human limitation. Jesus also emphasized that imagination is a form of spiritual sight. He taught that what one imagines with conviction becomes a blueprint for reality. The mind forms the image, and divine power brings it into expression. He encouraged people to imagine themselves whole, successful, guided, protected, and empowered. He urged them to see the end from the beginning, to hold the desired state in mind until it becomes natural, familiar, and unquestioned. When the mind accepts an idea fully, the gateway opens, and divine power flows consistently toward its fulfillment. In the Ethiopian Bible, Jesus' message about the mind is clear. The divine works through consciousness. The mind is not a barrier, but a bridge. It is the place where spiritual power enters human experience. When one understands this truth, life is no longer governed by circumstances, but by inner alignment. The mind becomes the gateway through which divine power flows, shaping reality according to the depth and clarity of one's belief. Jesus revealed that inner vision and belief determine the miracles one experiences in life. And when we explore this truth deeply, we begin to understand that every act of transformation he performed was rooted not in external conditions, but in the invisible realm of consciousness. The Ethiopian Bible preserves this idea with clarity, portraying Jesus as one who understood the spiritual mechanics of creation. He spoke repeatedly about the power of seeing beyond appearances, inviting his followers to cultivate an inner vision, strong enough to override physical limitation. He knew that the unseen is more powerful than the seen, and that what one holds in the mind eventually becomes the shape of one's experience. This inner vision, strengthened by belief, functions as a spiritual magnet, drawing into form the very reality it contemplates. Jesus taught that no miracle begins on the outside. Every miracle begins in the hidden chambers of thought, imagination, and expectation. When Jesus healed the sick, restored the broken, multiplied provision, or calmed the storm, he was not reacting to the external situation. He was responding to an inner picture rooted in divine truth. His eyes saw one thing, but his inner vision saw another. He saw abundance where others saw scarcity, strength where others saw weakness, wholeness where others saw illness. This ability to hold an inner vision higher than the evidence before him made miracles inevitable. According to the Ethiopian texts, he did not wait for the world to change before he believed. He believed first, and the world rearranged itself accordingly. This is the heart of his teaching. He wanted humanity to grasp that the power to shape circumstances lies not in the outer world, but in the inner conviction that directs it. Jesus also taught that belief is not a mere thought or wish. Belief is a state of consciousness in which the mind accepts a truth so deeply that it becomes the governing force of one's actions and expectations. To believe, in his teachings, is to unify the heart and mind in certainty. It is to see the desired outcome so clearly within that doubt cannot take root. In the Ethiopian Bible, belief is portrayed not as a fragile hope but as a creative force that bends reality toward itself. Jesus continually emphasized that according to your faith, life responds, meaning that the measure of one's belief determines the measure of one's experience. When inner vision is strong, outer transformation follows naturally. He repeatedly corrected his followers when they looked only at the visible world. He urged them to cultivate the eye of faith, the inner sight that perceives spiritual truth, even when the physical world appears contradictory. He understood that the senses are limited, but the mind aligned with divine principle is unlimited. The Ethiopian texts preserve moments when Jesus explained that every person lives in two realms simultaneously, the visible realm of forms and the invisible realm of spiritual potential. He taught that the invisible realm is the true source of miracles, because it is untouched by limitation. When one learns to see from this inner realm, miracles become not extraordinary events, but natural expressions of divine law. This inner vision is not passive, it is an active spiritual practice. Jesus encouraged people to hold images of health, peace, abundance, and freedom in their minds. He knew that the mind naturally creates a blueprint for reality, and whatever blueprint is accepted becomes the pattern for one's life. If a person continually sees themselves as weak, life mirrors that vision. If they see themselves as blessed, life arranges itself to confirm it. Jesus invited his listeners to deliberately choose inner images that align with divine truth rather than with fear or limitation. He understood that whatever image dominates consciousness becomes the seed from which external experiences grow. In the Ethiopian Bible, Jesus often speaks of those who witnessed miracles, but did not understand the inner process behind them. Many saw the outward result, but never realized that the real miracle occurred in consciousness before it appeared in form. He wanted them to see that they too possessed this inner creative mechanism. He taught that the power to manifest, heal, and transform was not exclusive to him but available to anyone who mastered inner vision and belief. His statement that greater works shall you do was not metaphorical, it was an instruction. He revealed that inner certainty opens the way for divine power to express through the individual. When the mind becomes anchored in belief, the divine responds with precision and abundance. The Ethiopian texts highlight that miracles are not random acts of divine intervention, but responses to inner alignment. Jesus showed that the universe is governed by spiritual laws, just as the physical world is governed by natural laws. These laws do not respond to desperation, fear, or pleading. They respond to belief, clarity, and expectation. Inner vision acts as the mold, and divine energy fills that mold. Jesus demonstrated this each time he spoke with authority, not because he possessed something others lacked, but because he knew how to align his inner world with divine truth. He became a living expression of the principle that the invisible shapes the visible. He also taught that belief is strengthened through inner repetition. What one continually sees in the mind becomes familiar, and what becomes familiar becomes believable. Jesus urged people to meditate on truth, to fill their minds with images of the good they desired, until these images felt more real than their current circumstances. He understood that the mind cannot hold two contradictory visions at once. The vision held most consistently becomes the dominant reality. The Ethiopian Bible preserves teachings where Jesus emphasizes that spiritual mastery begins with mental mastery. When the inner world is disciplined, the outer world becomes obedient. Jesus also addressed the destructive power of negative inner vision. He warned that fear, worry, and doubt create their own unwanted realities. These mental states act as seeds, planting outcomes that mirror their nature. He urged people not to meditate on their troubles, but to lift their consciousness to a higher perception of possibility. He knew that negative images drain spiritual energy, while positive images amplify it. This is why he instructed his followers to pray believing they had already received what they asked for. This was not a poetic saying. It was a description of spiritual causation. When the mind accepts something as already accomplished, the divine flow moves toward manifesting it. In his teachings, inner vision is the language of the soul, and belief is the force that activates spiritual law. When these two work together, miracles become a natural expression of divine presence. Jesus revealed that life is not shaped by accidents or fate, but by consciousness. The Ethiopian Bible captures his message with profound clarity, that the inner image one holds determines the outer life one lives. One who sees with the inner eye rises above conditions. One who believes with unwavering conviction becomes a magnet for divine manifestation. Through these teachings, Jesus offered humanity a blueprint for transformation, rooted not in struggle but in the power of inner vision and belief. Spoken words act as creative commands that align reality with one's inner conviction. And when we examine the Ethiopian Bible closely, we discover that Jesus consistently emphasized the profound power of speech as an extension of thought and consciousness. He taught that the words we speak are not merely sounds or social expressions, they are active vibrations that shape the energy around us and have the potential to manifest outcomes in the physical world. The ancient texts make it clear that speech is a spiritual instrument, a channel through which the invisible realm interacts with the visible. Every declaration, whether conscious or unconscious, sets into motion forces that respond to the underlying belief behind the words. Jesus understood that the alignment of inner conviction and spoken expression is a law of creation, a principle that governs the unfolding of all events in life. Throughout the Ethiopian scriptures, Jesus demonstrates that words are the outward reflection of inner realities. He instructed his followers to speak as if it is already done, revealing that speech is a tool for translating inner certainty into outer form. When he spoke to the sick, he did not merely utter sympathetic words, he declared reality in alignment with the divine order he perceived within. His words carried authority not because of their eloquence, but because they were rooted in a consciousness of perfect alignment with divine truth. The act of speaking in such a manner is both a declaration and an activation, a command to the universe to bring forth that which the mind has already accepted as real. Jesus' teachings in these texts stress that casual or careless words can create outcomes in accordance with what is held in the mind. He warns against negative speech because it acts as a mirror of inner doubts and fears, bringing forth conditions that reflect those mental states. Conversely, words spoken with conviction, clarity, and faith initiate the flow of divine power into tangible expression. The Ethiopian Bible presents numerous instances where he shows that the spoken word is not separate from thought, it is thought made manifest, a bridge between internal intention and external reality. In this way, speech becomes a form of active creation, capable of shaping circumstances, influencing lives, and even altering the course of events when aligned with the mind's higher vision. The texts emphasize that speaking with authority requires more than repetition. It requires belief. Jesus points out that empty words without conviction are powerless. The universe responds to certainty, not to casual utterance. When one speaks from doubt, hesitation, or fear, the words fail to carry creative force. But when one speaks from a mind and heart unified in belief, the spoken command resonates through consciousness, invoking the law that governs manifestation. This principle is not limited to extraordinary miracles. It governs everyday reality. Every promise spoken, every affirmation declared, every intention voiced has the potential to transform circumstances when it originates from inner alignment. Jesus also elucidates the connection between thought, belief, and speech in a way that underscores the responsibility of consciousness. He teaches that the words a person utters are reflections of inner beliefs, and that speaking contrary to one's desired reality reinforces limitations instead of dissolving them. In the Ethiopian Bible, he instructs his followers to cultivate a mental image of the desired outcome first, and then to let speech serve as a precise instrument to project that inner reality outward. This sequence, thought, belief, speech, is the pathway to effective manifestation. Words are not merely symbolic. They are functional expressions of the mind's alignment with divine principle. They carry a momentum that organizes energy around the intention being voiced. The texts also reveal that Jesus viewed speech as a form of spiritual authority. When he said, "According to your faith be it done," He was indicating that words aligned with belief are not merely passive observations. They are active commands in the invisible order. Every spoken word has a vibrational signature that interacts with spiritual law. The power of speech is magnified when it emerges from a consciousness that is clear, focused, and free of contradictory doubts. In essence, Jesus taught that the human being is a channel of divine expression, and speech is the vehicle through which this expression moves into form. Properly understood and applied, this principle allows the individual to co-create with the divine, shaping life through intentional verbalization. Moreover, Jesus stresses the transformative and healing aspect of words. In multiple examples, he shows that healing begins with the spoken declaration aligned with inner certainty. To the blind, the lame, the sick, he speaks, and the external condition yields to the force of aligned consciousness. The Ethiopian Bible emphasizes that this is not mere ritual or superstition. It is a demonstration of spiritual law in action. Words, when spoken with authority and belief, act as instruments of realignment, bringing outer circumstances into harmony with inner truth. They are, in essence, commands issued from the center of consciousness to the fabric of reality itself. He also teaches that words should be used consciously and deliberately. Careless speech, negative commentary, or self-doubt expressed verbally can unintentionally create barriers, reinforce limitation, and perpetuate lack. Conversely, words carefully chosen to reflect the desired reality reinforce belief and accelerate manifestation. The Ethiopian texts repeatedly stress the importance of vigilance over one's verbal expressions, highlighting that mastery of speech is a key component of spiritual and practical mastery. Through disciplined, conscious use of words, a person can channel divine power to heal, transform, and influence both personal circumstances and the surrounding world. Jesus' instructions extend to the cultivation of affirmations, declarations, and prayers as instruments of conscious creation. He teaches that when inner belief is matched with spoken words, a powerful chain of causation begins. The inner mind aligns with the spoken word, and the spoken word activates the outer world to conform. The principle is consistent and reliable. It works according to the measure of conviction and clarity in the speaker. The Ethiopian Bible portrays this not as a mystical idea, but as a practical law that governs existence, a law that operates whether one is consciously aware of it or not. Mastery of this principle, therefore, becomes essential for anyone seeking to live a life of conscious power. The texts also emphasize that repetition and consistency in speech reinforce inner alignment. When words are spoken repeatedly with the emotional force of belief, they solidify mental images and create persistent vibrational patterns that influence the external world. Jesus encourages his followers to speak as though the desired outcome is already achieved, cultivating a state of internal certainty that makes the outer manifestation inevitable. The consistency of speech, backed by unwavering belief, becomes the engine through which spiritual power flows reliably. Words are no longer passive. They are active instruments shaping the very framework of life in accordance with divine law. Furthermore, Jesus teaches that verbal expression should always reflect alignment with truth and divine order. Speech rooted in divine consciousness carries authority and attracts support from the spiritual realm. Speech rooted in fear, doubt, or limitation generates resistance, confusion, and undesired results. By instructing his followers to speak in harmony with the inner vision of truth, he provides a roadmap for co-creating with the divine. The Ethiopian Bible makes it clear that this principle is universal and accessible to all, not reserved for the spiritually elite. Every individual has the capacity to harness the power of words, provided they cultivate inner alignment and speak from a place of conviction. In essence, the Ethiopian text portrays speech as the practical tool through which consciousness interacts with reality. Jesus' teachings guide humanity to recognize that the words spoken are far more than communication. They are instruments of creation. By learning to align speech with inner belief, a person activates divine power, directs energy, and initiates transformation. This principle applies not only to extraordinary miracles, but to all aspects of life, including relationships, health, provision, and personal development. The spoken word, when aligned with inner certainty, becomes a channel through which divine intelligence flows, shaping life according to the vision held in the mind. The kingdom within is a living power meant to be used for healing, manifestation, and transformation. And in the Ethiopian Bible, Jesus repeatedly emphasizes that this kingdom is not a distant place to be sought externally, but an immediate reality to be discovered and activated within each person. He reveals that the divine presence resides in consciousness, waiting to be recognized, accessed, and expressed. This inner kingdom is the source of all miracles, all wisdom, and all creative power, yet it remains dormant in most because people look outward for solutions rather than inward. Jesus teaches that the true path to transformation begins with turning attention inward, understanding that the mind, heart, and spirit together form the gateway through which this kingdom expresses itself. By cultivating awareness of this inner power, individuals can align themselves with the laws of divine operation and bring forth healing, provision, and transformation naturally. In the Ethiopian texts, Jesus describes the kingdom as a dynamic energy rather than a static concept. It is alive, responsive, and inherently creative. He explains that the kingdom operates according to universal principles that are constant, immutable, and accessible to anyone who learns to attune their consciousness to them. When the mind and heart are aligned with the truth of this inner kingdom, miracles follow naturally. Healing occurs not because of ritual or external intervention, but because the individual has tapped into the living power within. When a person recognizes the inner kingdom, they begin to realize that they are not separate from divine source, but are conduits through which the divine manifests in the world. Jesus emphasizes that accessing the kingdom within requires focus, belief, and deliberate cultivation of inner awareness. He encourages his followers to withdraw from the distractions of the external world, to enter the stillness of thought and intention, and to recognize the presence of divine energy within. This practice is not about physical effort or complex rituals. It is about mental alignment and spiritual perception. The Ethiopian Bible preserves his teaching that the kingdom is activated when the mind is purified of doubt, fear, and conflicting desires. When the inner consciousness is unified, the life force within flows freely, and the individual becomes a channel through which healing and transformation naturally occur. The kingdom within, according to Jesus, is intimately connected to the human ability to manifest. Every act of creation begins first as an inner recognition of what is desired. When a person holds a vision of health, abundance, or success within, and aligns that vision with belief, gratitude, and expectation, the kingdom responds by organizing circumstances to bring that vision into reality. He teaches that manifestation is not a matter of coercing the external world, but of harmonizing the inner self with the invisible order that governs life. By understanding and cooperating with this inner law, a person becomes a conscious creator, shaping reality in accordance with divine intelligence. Healing, as described in these texts, is one of the most direct expressions of the kingdom within. Jesus demonstrates repeatedly that true healing begins internally. The body, mind, and spirit are intimately connected, and the state of consciousness governs physical well-being. He teaches that by entering the kingdom within, one can access the energy that restores harmony and balance to the body, alleviates suffering, and removes limitation. The Ethiopian Bible emphasizes that this process is not mystical or symbolic, it is a natural operation of spiritual law. When a person recognizes and inhabits the kingdom within, they tap into a source of limitless healing, capable of transforming themselves and influencing the well-being of others. Jesus also explains that the kingdom within is the source of transformation beyond the physical realm. It is the foundation for personal growth, emotional mastery, and spiritual evolution. By accessing this inner power, individuals gain the ability to overcome internal obstacles, release limiting beliefs, and cultivate virtues such as patience, compassion, and wisdom. Transformation begins with recognition of the inner kingdom, and it extends outward, influencing relationships, circumstances, and life's broader expression. The Ethiopian Bible preserves numerous passages where he emphasizes that the outer world shifts in accordance with inner change, underscoring that true power is always cultivated from within. Manifestation, as connected to the kingdom within, relies on the understanding that thoughts, feelings, and intentions are creative forces. Jesus teaches that the inner kingdom is not passive. It responds actively to the quality and clarity of consciousness. When the mind is focused on truth, love, and abundance, the kingdom orchestrates events, opens doors, and arranges opportunities in perfect alignment with inner vision. The Ethiopian texts reveal that the act of manifestation is the interplay between human awareness and divine energy, facilitated by belief and expectation. By consciously directing attention toward desired outcomes while maintaining inner harmony, a person activates the kingdom's power to bring those outcomes into being. Gratitude is another essential aspect of activating the kingdom within. Jesus frequently demonstrates that the acknowledgement of divine presence and the expression of gratitude accelerates the flow of energy from the kingdom into life. By focusing on what is already present and giving thanks, the mind aligns with abundance rather than lack. The Ethiopian Bible illustrates multiple instances where Jesus gives thanks before miracles occur, teaching that the act of gratitude signals readiness to receive and amplifies the divine flow. Gratitude bridges the inner perception of abundance with its external realization, making the kingdom within a living and operative force. Jesus emphasizes that the kingdom within is meant to be shared and expressed outwardly. It is not a private possession, but a source of empowerment for others as well. By inhabiting the kingdom, a person naturally radiates healing, inspiration, and transformation to those around them. The Ethiopian texts repeatedly indicate that the purpose of recognizing the kingdom within is to become a channel of divine activity, extending its power to impact the world positively. This teaching underscores that inner power is not meant for selfish gain, but for co-creation and service, allowing individuals to contribute to the elevation of collective consciousness while manifesting their own well-being. The Ethiopian Bible also teaches that the kingdom within is infinite and inexhaustible. Jesus describes it as a living source, constantly replenishing, limitless, and eternally present. It is not dependent on external circumstances, social status, or material conditions. This understanding empowers individuals to access strength, healing, and creative power at any moment, independent of outside limitations. The realization of this truth shifts the perception of life from one of scarcity and struggle to one of abundance and possibility. By cultivating awareness of this inner kingdom, people learn that the power to transform their reality resides within themselves, ready to be activated through thought, intention, and conscious alignment. Furthermore, Jesus' teachings show that the kingdom within is accessible to everyone, regardless of background, age, or circumstance. The Ethiopian texts highlight that divine power is not reserved for the spiritually elite. It is a universal inheritance, waiting to be claimed. He provides practical guidance for accessing this kingdom through meditation, prayer, focus, and intentional living. The key is recognizing that the inner world precedes the outer, and that transformation, healing, and manifestation are the natural outcomes of aligning with the living power within. By understanding that the kingdom within is a living power, individuals begin to see life differently. Challenges are no longer obstacles but opportunities to practice alignment. Limitations are no longer walls but indicators of where inner focus must be strengthened. Every experience becomes a reflection of inner consciousness, offering guidance on how to cultivate belief, clarity, and expectation. Jesus teaches that when one consistently draws upon the inner kingdom, life unfolds with coherence, harmony, and purpose. The Ethiopian Bible captures this wisdom in a way that bridges ancient understanding with practical application, showing that the kingdom within is both the source and the method for creating a life filled with healing, abundance, and transformation.